This is the Raw Project, where wisdom and encouragement meet authenticity. Hi, welcome to the Raw Project, real authentic wisdom. So glad to have you back for episode 6. Thank you so much for your input over the last 5 weeks as we've been doing our episodes, and just keep it coming. Keep your comments, your likes, your subscribes. I think that's a word, subscribes. Keep that coming because we really appreciate it. My son and I are going on this journey, and we're so thankful that you're going with us. And so today is episode 6, like I said, and it's called The Empathy Gap. And so I'm talking about these issues that I see in the generation. So last week was respect. This week is empathy. And I think empathy is obviously way bigger than the generations, right? Because we see this going on in our culture in such a major way, is that people don't have empathy. It's something that's really lacking. And so let me tell you what the difference is between empathy and sympathy. You probably know, but it always is good to remind yourself. So sympathy is when you look at a person's situation, maybe their problem, their pain, their grief, whatever it is, you look at that situation through your own perspective. You have your own perspective about it, so you're looking at it. So for example, it's like you hear something bad on the news, or a friend tells you something about somebody that they know, or maybe it's even somebody that you know, a friend or a family member, and you're just like, oh, you feel pity, you feel sympathy for their situation. Sometimes sympathy can even go to the point where you feel like, oh, I feel really bad about this situation, but I'm so thankful that it's not me. And so that's sympathy, looking at something through your own perspective, right? Empathy, however, is when you're able to look at someone else's story, their pain, their grief, their discouragement, whatever it might be, you're able to look at it from their perspective. You're actually able to put yourself in their shoes. And that takes another skill set. That takes something different. That takes your heart being open and being involved and being alive so that you can actually have empathy for your fellow man. And I think that that's something that's missing. It's missing in our society. It's missing in the generations. It's a real gap. And I think, if you're paying attention to anything that's happening in the culture, it's been emphasized so much that we are a culture that lacks empathy. It's just, we can't put ourselves in someone else's shoes. We can't look at someone else's pain from their perspective. And I think that that's something that we have to be willing to do. I know that, growing up, it was like that wasn't something that was necessarily practiced around me. Looking at people's pain or their situations, trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. It was more like, oh, I'm so thankful that I don't really have to go through that. And now I feel like that's something that has kept us separate. It's kept my generation separate from the younger generation, and vice versa. That's happened. And so what the older generation, I'll speak for myself, what we've done a lot of times is that we look at the younger generation and we look at them and we're like, they're such snowflakes. Have you heard that term, snowflakes, that as soon as they hit the pavement, it melts, and I think about that. So it's like we as older people at times, we look at the younger generation and we think, This is nothing, you guys. You guys haven't been through anything. You're just such snowflakes. Anything that goes on, you just melt, and you can't make it, or you can't rise above it, or you can't overcome it. And so no empathy whatsoever. And I think the reverse is true. I think the younger people have tolerated or put up with such a lack of empathy from us. They have a lack of empathy back towards us. And so then they're just like, oh my gosh, here they go again with their stories. Here they go again with telling us how we should feel or how we should think, or they don't even understand really what we're going through. And so then there's this big empathy gap. It's just not there. And so I think today I want to talk just a little bit about how we can bridge the gap of empathy, how we can do that with the generation. So I want to talk about it first from my perspective. So I've heard people say the snowflake thing to the younger generation, like they don't even really know what a problem is. And have you ever had somebody tell you or give you some advice that's like doesn't help you at all? It actually makes you feel some type of way. I've had that happen many times in my life where people have, like, supposedly they're giving me empathy, but they're looking at my problem or my situation and they're talking about how it's not that big a deal. They're talking about, oh, I had something like that happen before. It's not that big a deal. You'll get over it. Don't worry about it. It's, I had this happen to me and this was a real problem, really terrible. So then they try to one up you. They try to make your problem seem less. Empathy is about validation, that you actually are able to validate the person's problem. Maybe you've never even experienced it. Maybe you've never went through it, what have you, but you can yet, if you have empathy, you can validate it. You can listen to them and you can hear what they're going through, and then you can put yourself in their shoes. So it's not really about you, it's about them. Empathy is about the other person. And I think that that's something that we have to do, is that we have to remember that other people have problems, other people have situations, they have experiences, they've had really tough times, they've had grief, they've had pain that they're going through. And what they need is for somebody to have empathy, not for somebody to one up them and tell them a worse story. Not for somebody to say, oh, you're a snowflake, so you can't, this is really not that big a deal. Or they don't need for somebody just to look at it and pity them and be like, oh, thank God I'm not going through that situation. What they need is actual, authentic empathy that says, wow, you're going, that actually happened to you? Unreal. How do you feel about it? Asking them questions, listening to their story. I am going to talk later about the listening gap. That's another episode, so you have to stay tuned. But listening is such a key part to being empathetic. You don't want to interrupt people. You want to listen to what they have to say. So an older person like myself, listening to a millennial or even younger than that person, listening to their problem. No, I probably haven't been ridiculed on social media. I probably haven't had pictures taken of me or being filmed secretly and then that being sent out all over the school, or just you name it. All sorts of situations that the younger generation has that us older folk, we haven't had to go through. But we have to be willing to sit down with them and listen to their pain and be able to empathize with it and listen to their hurt over the situation that they find themselves in. You know, whether it be a disappointment over a relationship, or maybe it's a disappointment over a job situation that they didn't get, or maybe it's something else, but we need to sit down. We can't just blow it off. Empathy doesn't blow things off. Empathy takes the time to listen, to sit down, and to actually try to understand another person's pain, looking at it from their perspective. So for us old folk, we need to be listening to the younger generation, what they're going through. I tell you what, it was really shocking to me when my son, Harrison, you met him a couple episodes ago, when he started to talk to me about the mental health situations of people his age, of the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings, the mental health things that they're struggling with. And I think one of the big issues is that it's because of the lack of empathy, the lack of understanding what they're going through, the lack of understanding that they may be lonely, the lack of understanding that they may really want to be in a relationship, but they don't even really know how to meet people, you know, or it's so hard to meet people. So there's just a number of things. And so I think us as the older generation, we need to understand that we have to try to put ourselves in their shoes. Now, I think for the younger generation, I think you guys have to try to put yourself in our shoes too. We're at a point in our life, you know, that we're thinking about, you know, retirement maybe, or we're thinking about even death. We're thinking about, you know, our lives that have just went so quickly, and we're coming to the end of our life. And so we're thinking about that. We're thinking about how, what's going to happen to our kids after we're gone, or we're thinking about, you know, our spouses, if we're married, you know, what's going to happen if, you know, who's going to die first. We're thinking about all these things too. And I know that that's really hard for a younger person to put their self in the place of a married person's shoes, or a retired person's shoes, or just even like an elderly grandma or grandfather or something in their shoes. I know that it can be really difficult to do that. But the thing that we have to remember about the gaps, like the respect gap, the empathy gap, the things that we have to remember about those gaps that we have is that there is a commonality. And the commonality that we have in the gaps are that we both are humans and we both feel pain. We both feel pain. We both feel loss. We both feel joy. We feel hope. We feel sadness. We all have those range of emotions, the range of feelings. We have that. And so whether you've experienced either thing, whether you've experienced retirement or death, or whether you've experienced, something happening on, social media that just was awful, or you've lost a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or situations like that, whether you've experienced those things or not, you have a commonality. And that is that I guarantee you've experienced pain. I guarantee that you've experienced some sort of loss or some sort of heartache. I guarantee that that's happened to you. And so that's where you come. When there's a gap, you walk out of your place and you walk to the common ground. And the common ground for us when it comes to empathy is that all of us have been through something. We all have a story. We've all suffered, and we've gone through it. And if you can remember that when you sit down and you talk to somebody that's older than you or somebody that's younger than you, when they're pouring out their heart to you, then you can stop in that moment and be like, oh my gosh, what must they feel like right now? You're looking at them. You're intently listening. You're being intentional. You're watching their body language. You're seeing maybe even their tears or their frustration and what have you. And you're putting yourself in their place. And when you do that, when you actually put yourself in someone else's shoes, what you do or what you're saying is that I identify with you. I am with you. I am actually willing to carry your burden. I'm actually willing to go down that road with you in your sadness or in your grief, or maybe I'm willing to go down that place, that road with you in your joy and in your hope. I'm willing to go with you. And that's what empathy does. Empathy says yes. It says, yes, you know what? I may have not have experienced that before, but you are important. You are valuable. Your feelings are valid. And yes, I want to experience that with you. I want to put myself in your shoes. And I think that's what we need to do. Come to the common ground, recognize that we're human beings and that we all have pain and we've all suffered and we'll suffer again and we'll have pain again and we'll have hope and joy and love and all these things again. But come to the common ground and say to the person that needs you, I want to understand. I want to understand what you're going through right now. And that opens up your heart to empathy. You move past sympathy and you move into the realm of being empathetic. Everybody has a story. Everybody has something that they've gone through that's been probably horrific. And they've experienced something that you haven't experienced or I haven't experienced. And they need somebody to hear them out. They need somebody to listen and empathize. You don't have to come up with a solution. You don't have to fix the problem. You don't have to try to, like I said, one up them and give them a worse horror story. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is listen and empathize. Step out of your perspective and step into their perspective. Look at it from their point of view. And I think if you do that, it will not only make you a better individual, but it will also give you the tools that you need to actually carry somebody else's burden or be there for somebody else. We need to do that. You know, I want to leave you with this. A person that I really admire says this. He says, you know, the greatest form of deception is self-justification. The greatest form of deception is self-justification. When you are empathizing with people, you're empathizing with their story. You're empathizing with what they're going through. You're empathizing with their pain. And I'm saying this as a Black woman, as a Black individual that's grown up, you know, in a mostly, you know, in a society where there's just been a lot of racism. And I want to say this, when I'm telling my story, or you may be Mexican, you may be Filipino, you may be Chinese, you may be, you know, there's so many different ethnic groups. You may be one of those ethnic groups where you've felt marginalized, or you've felt, overlooked, or you've felt like no one empathized with you because of your story. Nobody empathized. They were like, well, I didn't do that to you, or I didn't, cause you that pain. So they go immediately to self-justification versus going immediately to empathy, to understanding, to putting their self in your shoes or in my shoes. And so I want to encourage us to be a people that don't self-justify, that we're not deceived by that. We don't need to self-justify. What we need to do is empathize with our fellow man, and carry their burden and listen to their story and help them to know that what they're feeling is valid, even though we may have not went through it, or maybe we don't even completely understand it, but that we are willing to see things from their perspective and to help them to carry that burden. I think that's so important. And I just wanted to leave you with that today. Be a person that is able to empathize. Be a person that's able to walk a mile or two, or maybe even 3 in somebody else's shoes. You'll be better for it, and so will they. Thank you. We'll see you next time.